Melissa Turner thought she was meeting Derek Lawson for a simple Friday night dinner, but within hours she would be found lifeless in a rusted barrel, and Angela Reed, a woman from her past, would emerge as the key to unraveling a chilling conspiracy no one saw coming. On a quiet Friday evening in April 2014, the city of Sacramento was just beginning to slow down from the rush of the week. College students spilled out of campus libraries, families filled neighborhood restaurants, and the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a soft orange glow. For 23-year-old Melissa Turner, the evening carried a sense of nervous excitement. She had been balancing the stress of her business degree, working part-time at a bookstore, and rarely took time for herself. But that night was different. Melissa had agreed to meet someone new, someone she had been messaging for several weeks on a popular dating app. Friends remembered how cautious she usually was, the kind of person who double-checked locks, avoided walking alone at night, and shared her location whenever she met with someone unfamiliar. This time, however, she decided to take a leap of faith. Before leaving her apartment, Melissa carefully chose her outfit: a pale blue dress, simple jewelry, and a light jacket to guard against the cool spring air. She told her roommate Erin that she would be back within a few hours, describing the meetup as just dinner, nothing serious. Erin would later recall how Melissa seemed slightly hesitant, pausing in the doorway as if she were second-guessing the whole idea, but then she smiled, shrugged it off, and left around 7 o'clock. Her drive was uneventful, at least from what investigators could later piece together. Phone records showed Melissa checked her messages while stopped at a red light, responding with a quick, "I'm on my way." She was seen briefly on a nearby security camera at a gas station, fueling her car and grabbing a bottle of water. The timestamp read 7:12 p.m. She looked calm, ordinary, like any young woman going out on a Friday night. That image would become the last clear glimpse of her life before everything took a chilling turn. By 9:30 p.m., when Melissa still hadn't returned, Erin began to worry. She called, but Melissa's phone went unanswered. Messages that normally would have been read instantly remained undelivered. At first, Erin tried to reason with herself. Maybe the date was going well, maybe Melissa had just forgotten to check in. But as the hours ticked by, anxiety grew heavier. By midnight, Melissa's phone had gone completely dark, shutting off entirely. That was not like her at all. Melissa's family was notified almost immediately. Her mother, Catherine, drove across town to her daughter's apartment, hoping for some explanation, only to find Erin pacing in the living room with tears welling in her eyes. Together, they went to the police, reporting her missing before dawn. Officers began by asking the routine questions. Did she have a history of running away? Any recent arguments? Trouble at school or work? Each answer was the same. Melissa was steady, responsible, and grounded. Disappearing into the night without telling anyone was unthinkable. As the hours passed, friends and neighbors joined the search. Flyers with Melissa's smiling face, framed by long brown hair, were posted around campus and along neighborhood streets. Social media filled with desperate pleas for information. Her car, a small silver sedan, had not been found, and there were no immediate clues to suggest where she might have gone. It was as though she had stepped out the door and vanished into thin air. But investigators knew one fact for certain. The last time anyone had contact with Melissa was just minutes after she left her apartment. That narrow timeline would become the foundation for uncovering a case far darker than anyone imagined. The following morning, as dawn broke over Sacramento, the city slowly stirred to life. Joggers filled the sidewalks, early commuters made their way onto the roads, and the quiet hum of a new day spread across the neighborhoods. Just after 6:30 a.m., a pair of joggers veered off their usual trail, deciding to cut behind an abandoned storage facility near the outskirts of town. The area was overgrown with weeds, littered with rusted scraps of metal, and long forgotten by most residents. It wasn't the kind of place anyone visited unless they had a reason. Yet that morning, curiosity and an unusual odor in the air brought them closer. Near the dumpsters, half hidden by old wooden pallets, stood a large rusted metal barrel. It looked out of place, as though it had been dropped there in haste. Duct tape sealed the lid tightly, and as the joggers passed, they noticed a thick, overpowering smell leaking from it. At first, they thought it might be some kind of industrial waste left behind, but the odor was unmistakable, heavy and sickly in a way that made their stomachs turn. Alarmed, they called the police. When officers arrived, they immediately understood the seriousness of the situation. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape as investigators in gloves and masks carefully pried open the barrel. Inside, beneath old blankets and crumpled clothing, was the body of a young woman. Her pale blue dress was torn, her hair matted, and she had been forced into the confined space as if discarded like trash. It didn't take long for detectives to connect the discovery to the missing person report filed only hours earlier. The victim was identified as Melissa Turner. What struck investigators immediately was how hastily the disposal had been carried out. In many cases, perpetrators go to great lengths to conceal a body, burying it deep, transporting it far away, or destroying evidence. Here, the body had been left in a barrel on a property anyone could stumble upon. The barrel itself wasn't even hidden well. It was sitting in plain sight, the tape poorly wrapped around the top. It was as though the killer either wanted Melissa to be found or had panicked and run out of time. Detectives began their initial sweep of the area, photographing footprints in the dirt, tire tracks pressed into the mud, and a few strands of fabric caught on the jagged edge of the dumpster. The barrel was removed and sent to forensic labs where every inch would be examined. Early observations revealed bruising around Melissa's wrists, suggesting she had been restrained. There were also signs that she had been attacked not long after she left her apartment. The timeline was brutally short. Melissa had vanished around 7 in the evening, and by morning she was dead in a barrel. The speed of the crime stunned investigators. News of the discovery spread quickly. By mid-morning, helicopters hovered over the storage lot. Reporters crowded the police lines, and neighbors gathered in shock. Melissa's family was devastated. The hope that she might return safely was shattered in an instant. What had begun as a night filled with anticipation for Melissa had ended in horror, her life cut short before she ever made it to her planned dinner. For the detectives leading the case, the brutality of the crime made one thing clear. This was not the work of a random passerby. Whoever killed Melissa acted with startling aggression, and the barrel was more than just a means of disposal, it was a message. Now the investigation turned to a single urgent question: who was with Melissa on that Friday night, and why had her life been taken so quickly and carelessly? Detectives wasted no time in retracing Melissa's final hours. The dating app on her phone provided the first real lead. Through digital records, they discovered she had been chatting regularly with a man named Derek Lawson, a 31-year-old mechanic living only a few miles from where her car had been abandoned. Derek's profile showed a smiling, clean-cut man with a seemingly ordinary life. He had no prior arrests, no obvious red flags, and a reputation among neighbors as a quiet but hard-working individual. On the surface, nothing about him suggested danger. Yet Melissa had agreed to meet him, and now she was gone. Investigators called Derek in for questioning within 24 hours of the discovery. He didn't resist, arriving at the station in a plain t-shirt and jeans, speaking calmly as though he had nothing to hide. He admitted to matching with Melissa and confirmed they had talked about meeting up for dinner that night. But his version of events took an unexpected turn. According to Derek, Melissa never showed up. He said he had been at his friend's garage fixing a car from early evening until after midnight, providing a handful of names who could vouch for his whereabouts. His tone was steady, his body language measured, and he showed no outward signs of panic. To some detectives, he seemed genuine. To others, it was exactly the kind of performance a calculated liar might give. To test his story, detectives pulled security camera footage from businesses along Melissa's intended route. It didn't take long for them to spot her silver sedan entering a quiet strip mall parking lot at 7:22 p.m., less than half a mile from Derek's house. That discovery complicated everything. Why would Melissa drive to that location if she had no intention of meeting Derek? Her car was found later that night abandoned in the same lot, keys left inside, as though she had expected to return quickly but never did. The detail that chilled investigators most was the timestamp. From the moment Melissa parked her car to the time Derek claimed he was at the garage, there was a gap he could not fully explain. Forensic teams examined Melissa's car for evidence. Inside, they found her purse still on the passenger seat, untouched. Her phone was missing, suggesting someone had deliberately taken it. On the driver's side door, investigators swabbed for prints and discovered partial smudges that didn't match Melissa's. These results were inconclusive but pointed to the likelihood of another person being with her that night. Meanwhile, Melissa's family clung to hope that the truth would soon be uncovered. Her mother spoke publicly, urging anyone who might have seen Melissa or her car to come forward. Tips poured in, but many were dead ends. Strangers who thought they had spotted her at gas stations or diners, reports that led nowhere. The one clear fact remained: Melissa had driven into that strip mall, and something terrible had happened to her almost immediately afterward. Detectives began digging deeper into Derek's background. While his record was clean, whispers of a darker side began to surface. Former acquaintances described him as controlling in relationships, someone who became possessive quickly. An ex-girlfriend, when contacted, admitted she had cut ties with him after a series of arguments that left her frightened. Though none of these accounts were criminal in nature, they painted a troubling picture. The investigation was at a crossroads. On one hand, Derek Lawson appeared to be the only logical suspect, the man Melissa had planned to meet the night of her death. On the other hand, his calm alibi and the absence of direct evidence left room for doubt. Detectives knew they were missing something, a piece of the puzzle that would explain why Melissa's life had been ended so swiftly and why her body had been hidden in such a crude, careless manner. What they didn't know yet was that another figure would soon emerge from the shadows, shifting the direction of the entire case. As the investigation pressed forward, detectives expected the evidence to circle back to Derek Lawson. He had been the last known person connected to Melissa, and the timeline pointed squarely in his direction. Yet, when forensic reports from the barrel arrived, the case took an unexpected and unnerving turn. Alongside the faint smudges that couldn't be matched, investigators found distinct fingerprints on the outer rim of the barrel. After careful comparison, the prints didn't belong to Derek. Instead, they were traced to a woman named Angela Reed, a 27-year-old former co-worker of Melissa's. Angela's name caught detectives off guard. At first glance, she seemed irrelevant. She hadn't been in contact with Melissa in nearly a year, at least not officially. But a review of employment records revealed the truth. Melissa had once worked at a small marketing firm where Angela was also employed. Tension between the two had been noted in HR documents after Melissa filed a complaint about Angela's hostile behavior. Angela had been dismissed shortly afterward, leaving with bitterness that never quite faded. Suddenly, Melissa's death wasn't just a random act of violence tied to a date gone wrong. It looked like the past had reached out in a sinister way. When brought in for questioning, Angela denied everything. She insisted she hadn't seen or spoken to Melissa since the day she left the firm. She claimed she had been at home the night Melissa vanished, scrolling through social media and watching television alone. Her demeanor was defensive, almost rehearsed. She scoffed at the idea that her fingerprints would be on the barrel, saying she had no access to such items. Yet the fingerprint match was undeniable, and investigators began to probe her story further. Phone records were the next step, and what they uncovered deepened the mystery. In the weeks leading up to Melissa's disappearance, Angela had made dozens of late-night calls to a number registered to Derek Lawson. They weren't casual calls either. Some lasted more than an hour. The discovery left detectives stunned. Derek had presented himself as a stranger connected to Melissa only through the dating app. Yet here he was secretly tied to Angela, a woman who had a clear motive against Melissa. The threads were suddenly twisting together in ways no one anticipated. Theories began to form inside the investigation team. Was Angela trying to frame Derek for Melissa's murder by planting her own fingerprints, hoping to shift suspicion away from herself? Or had Derek and Angela joined forces, their connection deeper and darker than anyone realized? It was possible Derek had lured Melissa into a trap, and Angela had helped orchestrate the crime as an act of revenge. Detectives turned back to surveillance footage, combing through hours of grainy video from the strip mall and surrounding streets. A breakthrough came when they spotted a pickup truck idling near the storage facility late that night. The vehicle was traced through registration records and belonged to Derek Lawson. That placed him squarely at the scene where Melissa's body was discovered. His calm alibi now looked far less convincing. With Derek and Angela both emerging as key players, the case took on a far more sinister shape. This was no longer a simple story of a young woman meeting the wrong person online. It was beginning to look like a calculated partnership, two people bound together by resentment, jealousy, and something far more disturbing than chance. Detectives knew the truth was close, but they also understood that uncovering it would reveal not just how Melissa died, but why her life had been so quickly and brutally stolen. The final pieces of the puzzle came together slowly, each new detail pulling investigators deeper into a story that seemed stranger than fiction. At first glance, Melissa's murder had appeared to be the tragic outcome of a date gone wrong. Then it shifted into the possibility of workplace revenge. But as the evidence mounted, the truth pointed toward something far more chilling. Two people working together, feeding each other's darkest impulses. Detectives began unraveling the connection between Derek Lawson and Angela Reed. Records revealed that the two had been in a relationship years earlier, long before Melissa ever crossed either of their paths. Their romance had been volatile and brief, ending after multiple fights that drew the attention of neighbors and friends. Angela had described Derek in bitter terms afterward, calling him manipulative and untrustworthy. Derek, in turn, had dismissed Angela as unstable and dramatic. For all appearances, they had severed ties completely. But the late-night phone records told a different story, one of renewed contact and secret communication. Witnesses soon came forward. A man who worked at a convenience store near Angela's apartment recalled seeing Derek and Angela together on more than one occasion in the months before Melissa's death. They weren't affectionate, but they seemed familiar, comfortable enough to suggest that their bond had never truly broken. Another neighbor described loud arguments followed by stretches of silence, as though the pair thrived on chaos and secrecy. It became clear that their connection had reignited, though in what form was still uncertain. When detectives confronted Derek with the evidence, his calm demeanor began to crack. He admitted to seeing Angela again but downplayed the relationship, insisting they were only catching up. Angela, on the other hand, denied it outright until confronted with the store clerk's statement and the phone logs. The cracks in their separate stories widened until investigators could see through them. It was no coincidence Melissa had crossed paths with both of them. She had become the center of their twisted alliance, a victim chosen not because of who she was, but because she fit into their need to act out a shared fantasy of control and vengeance. The barrel itself provided another damning clue. It had been traced back to the warehouse where Angela once worked before losing her job. She had access to similar containers during her time there, and one had gone missing shortly after her dismissal. The implication was clear. Angela had kept it, storing it away until the moment came when she could use it. Derek's pickup truck placed him at the scene where the barrel was dumped, tying him directly to the disposal. Their combined actions told a story of joint responsibility. In court, prosecutors argued that Derek lured Melissa out under the pretense of a date, while Angela followed, waiting for her chance to act. Melissa never made it to dinner because she was confronted almost immediately, attacked, and overpowered. The haste of the crime explained why her body was discovered so quickly. It was never carefully hidden, only crudely contained. Derek provided the muscle, Angela provided the motive, and together they carried out a killing that shocked even seasoned investigators. The jury deliberated only briefly before finding both Derek Lawson and Angela Reed guilty of first-degree murder. The judge described the crime as a chilling partnership born from anger and obsession. Melissa's family sat quietly in the courtroom, clutching one another, knowing justice had been served but haunted by the senselessness of it all. For the community, the case became a haunting reminder that evil doesn't always look like a lone predator. Sometimes it comes in pairs, bound together by shared darkness, and sometimes the most ordinary-seeming connections hide the deadliest of secrets. Melissa Turner's story began as a hopeful evening out, but ended in a way no one could have imagined, sealed forever inside a barrel left behind as a silent witness to a crime that would never be forgotten.